You know what's strangely unsettling? Sometimes you can meet someone for less than 5 seconds and your mind has already made a decision your mouth would never say out loud. Nothing dramatic happened. They did not insult you. They did not betray you. They may not have even spoken yet. And still, something in you quietly pulls back. Your shoulders tighten, your attention narrows, a small private alarm goes off, and the feeling is immediate, almost primitive. Why does that happen? Why can one person walk into a room and feel instantly familiar, while another triggers irritation, suspicion, or discomfort before they have done anything objectively wrong? And why do these reactions often feel so certain, even when they turn out to be completely inaccurate? This is one of those experiences that most people have had, but very few people fully explain. We tend to describe it casually. We say things like, I just didn't like their vibe. Something felt off. They rubbed me the wrong way. There was just a bad feeling. But that explanation is really a placeholder. It names the experience without explaining the psychology behind it. And the psychology is deeper than it looks. Instant dislike is not usually random. It is often a fast emotional judgment built from old memories, pattern recognition, threat detection, social conditioning, personal insecurity, and the brain's constant obsession with efficiency. It can feel like intuition. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it is anxiety wearing the costume of wisdom. That distinction matters, because if you understand why instant dislike happens, you start to understand something much bigger than first impressions. You begin to understand how your mind protects you, how your past still shapes your present, how your emotions influence your perception, and why some of your strongest reactions say more about your own inner world than about the person standing in front of you. And that is where things get interesting. Tom Lee Hawk has studied first impressions for decades, and one of the most consistent findings is that human beings make social judgments extremely quickly. In some studies, people form stable impressions of traits like trustworthiness, competence, and likability in a fraction of a second. Your brain is constantly scanning for signs: facial expression, tone of voice, posture, eye contact, pace, clothing, familiarity, difference, confidence, hesitation. Every tiny detail becomes data. This happens because your brain is not designed to be neutral first and decisive later. It is designed to predict. It wants to know, as quickly as possible, whether a person is safe, useful, risky, dominant, deceptive, warm, cold, socially valuable, or socially threatening. That ancient system helped human beings survive in small groups where misreading someone could have real consequences. So when you feel instant dislike, one explanation is simple. Your brain believes it has noticed a zohio, a sign, a pattern, a warning. But here's the problem. Your brain is fast, not always fair. The same machinery that helps you detect real danger can also misfire. It can confuse unfamiliarity with threat. It can mistake confidence for arrogance. It can interpret quietness as hostility. It can read nervousness as dishonesty. It can fill in missing information with assumptions that feel true only because they arrive quickly. This is why first impressions are both useful and unreliable. They are psychologically meaningful, but not always psychologically accurate. One major reason for instant dislike is something called thin slicing. This is the brain's ability to make rapid judgments from very limited information. Malcolm Gladwell popularized the term, but the underlying research comes from social psychology and behavioral science. Thin slicing is not magic. It is compressed perception. Your mind notices fragments and builds a whole story around them before conscious thought has time to catch up. A person interrupts once, and your brain says rude. They smile too much, and your brain says fake. They avoid eye contact, and your brain says suspicious. They remind you of someone else, and your brain says danger. That last one is especially powerful. Often, instant dislike has very little to do with the present person and a great deal to do with emotional memory. The brain stores not only events, but patterns of feeling. If someone's voice, expression, energy, communication style, or even sense of humor resembles a person who once hurt, embarrassed, rejected, or intimidated you, the emotional system may react before logic has a chance to intervene. This is not a conscious process. You are usually not thinking, this person reminds me of my controlling teacher from when I was 12. Instead, you simply feel tense, irritated, guarded, or cold. The reaction appears immediate, but psychologically it may be old. In other words, the dislike feels new, but the feeling may have a history. This is one reason some people trigger us in ways we struggle to explain. They are not necessarily doing something wrong. They are activating a template, a stored relational experience, a piece of unfinished emotional learning. Attachment theory helps explain some of this. John Bowlby and later attachment researchers showed that our early relationships shape how we respond to closeness, distance, unpredictability, and emotional signals. If you grew up around criticism, inconsistency, emotional withdrawal, or conflict, your nervous system may become especially sensitive to particular traits in other people. Certain forms of assertiveness may feel aggressive, certain forms of silence may feel rejecting, certain forms of charm may feel manipulative. Two people can meet the exact same person and have completely different reactions, not because one of them is lying, but because each nervous system is reading through a different history. That is why instant dislike is so personal. Another explanation involves the negativity bias. This is one of the most replicated ideas in psychology. Human beings tend to notice, remember, and react more strongly to negative information than positive information. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes sense. Missing one threat is more dangerous than missing one opportunity. If the brain had to make an error, it often preferred the error that kept you alive. So when meeting someone new, your mind does not scan equally for all possibilities. It often gives more weight to possible risks. Is this person disrespectful, competitive, untrustworthy, unpredictable, socially dangerous, capable of lowering my status, capable of rejecting me? Notice how much of this has nothing to do with objective morality. It is deeply social. Human beings are social animals. Our ancestors depended on group inclusion. Rejection, humiliation, and conflict carried real survival costs. So modern social anxiety, why knee, and discomfort are not irrational in the way people often assume. They are exaggerated expressions of an old adaptive system. This becomes even more important when self-esteem is involved. If your long-term is fragile, instant dislike can sometimes be defensive. You may dislike people who seem too polished, too charismatic, too intelligent, too socially effortless, or too confident, not because they are bad people, but because their presence activates comparison. They become mirrors that reflect your insecurity back to you. This is one of the less comfortable B-mut in human behavior. Sometimes we do not dislike a person because they are threatening us directly. We dislike what we feel around them, our own inadequacy, our own envy, our own fear of not measuring up. That reaction is normal. It is also rarely admitted. Most people prefer moral explanations. They say, I have high standards. I am good at reading people. I just protect my peace. And sometimes that is true. But sometimes instant dislike is the ego trying to regain balance. If someone makes you feel small, behind, awkward, unnoticed, or unsure of yourself, your mind may solve that discomfort by lowering them in your perception. Arrogant, fake, annoying, overrated. This is not because you are cruel. It is because the mind often protects the Balthon before it seeks the truth. Projection also plays a role here. In psychodynamic psychology, projection is the tendency to attribute to others thoughts, feelings, or traits that we struggle to accept in ourselves. If you are deeply uncomfortable with your own need for attention, you may react strongly to attention-seeking behavior in others. If you suppress anger, you may be unusually bothered by assertive people. If you pride yourself on being rational, you may instantly dislike emotional intensity. If you fear your own social ambition, highly driven people may seem cold or calculating to you. The reaction feels like perception, but part of it may be self-recognition, and that can be profoundly irritating. There is another layer to this that has to do with identity and group psychology. Henry Tajfel's work on social identity theory showed that people naturally divide the social world into categories: us and them, familiar and unfamiliar, safe and uncertain. Even arbitrary group distinctions can quickly produce bias. We are more likely to trust those who seem like us and feel cautious around those who seem different from us in language, style, values, mannerisms, or worldview. This does not mean every instance of instant dislike is prejudice, but it does mean that human Yun Thuk is shaped by categorization more than most people realize. The brain uses shortcuts. If someone violates your expectations for how a person should speak, dress, behave, joke, signal respect, or communicate emotion, that mismatch can create tension immediately. And because these shortcuts are fast, they often hide beneath the language of instinct. This is where people say, I just had a feeling. Now, sometimes feelings are intelligent. Your mind can notice subtle inconsistencies long before your conscious thoughts can articulate them. Research on intuition suggests that the brain can process patterns beneath awareness and produce a useful emotional signal. This means instant dislike should not always be dismissed. There are situations where your nervous system picks up on genuine incongruence, aggression, entitlement, contempt, or manipulation before your rational mind can explain why. For example, you may notice micro-expressions of disdain, a fake smile that does not reach the eyes, a tone that sounds friendly but carries dominance, a rhythm of speech that constantly centers the self, tiny violations of social reciprocity. These things matter. People often communicate far more through subtext than through words, so no, instant dislike is not always irrational. Sometimes it is a real form of pattern detection, but this is exactly why it is complicated. The same system that can detect subtle danger can also confuse difference with threat, trauma echoes with intuition, insecurity with discernment, and habit with truth. To hear this better, it helps to think of instant dislike as having at least four possible sources. First, there is accurate threat perception. The person is giving off real signs of disrespect, inconsistency, aggression, manipulation, or emotional danger. Second, there is associative memory. They remind you of someone else, and your past is coloring the present. Third, there is ego defense. Their presence activates an insecurity, a comparison, or a disowned trait in you. Fourth, there is social conditioning. You have absorbed habits, stereotypes, or assumptions from your culture, family, or environment, and your brain is applying them automatically. Sometimes only one of these is active. Often several are happening at once, and this is why people can be so certain and so wrong. Think about how often instant dislike attaches itself to very small things. Someone laughs too loudly, someone takes too long to answer, someone seems too quiet at dinner, someone is overly enthusiastic, someone uses corporate language, someone is too agreeable, someone is too intense, someone does not mirror your energy in the expected way. None of these things mean much by themselves, but psychologically, they become symbols. Your brain does not merely record behavior, it interprets behavior. It asks, what kind of person would do that? Then it answers the question at speed. This is a very important point. You do not react to people as they are. You react to your interpretation of what their behavior means. A quiet person may seem arrogant to one observer and shy to another. A confident person may seem secure to one observer and narcissistic to another. A highly social person may seem warm to one observer and performative to another. The raw behavior is only part of the story. The rest is your own psychology. This becomes even more intense under stress. When you are tired, anxious, lonely, overloaded, or already socially defensive, your threshold for instant dislike drops. The nervous system becomes less generous, less curious, less patient. Ambiguity feels harder to tolerate. The brain wants fast sorting, safe, unsafe, for me, against me, keep, avoid. So if you have ever noticed that everyone seems more annoying when you are exhausted, that is not just a bad mood. It is psychology. Your emotional bandwidth affects your social perception. Anxiety, especially social anxiety, can also create false negative impressions. People who are highly vigilant for rejection often read neutral faces as cold, neutral pauses as disapproval, and ordinary differences as signs of exclusion. This has been studied in research on rejection sensitivity. Some individuals become so attuned to possible social threat that they over-detect it. They are not imagining their emotional discomfort. The kamsuk are real, but the interpretation can become biased toward danger. That means instant dislike can sometimes be a disguised form of self-protection against anticipated rejection. If I decide I don't like you first, then your opinion of me matters less. If I keep you at a distance, I reduce the risk of being hurt. If I label you as unpleasant, then withdrawing from you feels justified instead of vulnerable. Again, this is not a character flaw. It is often an adaptation. Many habits that look rude, cold, skeptical, or antisocial on the surface are actually defensive intelligence. They are strategies the mind developed to manage uncertainty. The person who seems instantly dismissive may be highly sensitive. The person who appears judgmental may be afraid. The person who trusts nobody may have learned from painful trial and error that caution was safer than openness. This does not make every reaction correct, but it does make it understandable. And understanding is important because people often feel guilty about instant dislike. They think, I should be nicer. I should be more open-minded. Why am I so reactive? Why do certain people make me irrationally uncomfortable? That guilt can create a second layer of stress, especially in thoughtful or highly conscientious people. But instant reactions are normal. They are part of being human. The question is not whether you have them. Everyone does. The question is what you do next. Do you treat the feeling as a verdict or as data? That single difference changes everything. If you treat instant dislike as a verdict, then the story closes. You stop observing. You stop learning. Confirmation bias takes over. Every small thing the person does becomes proof you were right. Psychology has shown repeatedly that once we form an impression, we selectively notice evidence that supports it and ignore evidence that challenges it. This is one reason first impressions can become self-fulfilling. You expect someone to be rude, so you become cooler with them. They sense your distance, so they become awkward. Their awkwardness confirms your suspicion, and now the entire relationship is being shaped by a conclusion formed in seconds. This is also where behavior confirmation enters the picture. Research by Snyder and Swan, among others, showed that our expectations about people can subtly influence how they behave around us. If you think someone is unlikable and respond with tension or minimal warmth, you may help produce the very interaction you feared. In that sense, instant dislike is not always just a private feeling. It can become a social force. But if you treat the feeling as data, something else happens. You become curious. You ask, what exactly am I reacting to? Is it their behavior or their resemblance to someone? Is this my intuition or my insecurity? What story did I tell myself in the first 10 seconds? What emotion is sitting underneath this? Fear, envy, mistrust, defensiveness, overstimulation, social fatigue? That kind of reflection does not make you naive. It makes you more accurate, and accuracy matters because some of the people we initially dislike end up becoming important to us. Not always, of course. Sometimes your first impression is correct. Sometimes someone really is manipulative, cruel, self-absorbed, or unsafe. But many times, what feels like an instant truth is simply an unfinished jail think. A lot of warm people seem awkward at first. A lot of intelligent people seem distant before they feel safe. A lot of anxious people seem unfriendly when they are actually overwhelmed. A lot of direct people seem harsh until you realize they are simply clear. A lot of introverted people seem cold until you understand their social rhythm. This is why psychology asks us to slow down around certainty. There is also a more emotional side to all this that people do not discuss enough. Instant dislike can be painful, not only for the person judged, but for the person doing the judging. Why? Because frequent social aversion can turn the world into an exhausting place. If many people feel irritating, fake, unsafe, shallow, loud, intrusive, or disappointing, then daily life starts to require constant filtering. You become tired, more isolated, more why-me, more convinced that meaningful connection is heme. Sometimes this is a sign of discernment, but sometimes it is a sign that your nervous system has become overprotective. That is an important distinction. A healthy mind can detect red flags without seeing them everywhere. A grounded person can notice discomfort without obeying it blindly. A socially wise person can trust intuition while still leaving room for correction. That balance is hard, but it is possible. One useful way to think about instant dislike is this. The first feeling is often involuntary. The second thought is where character begins. You do not always choose your immediate reaction, but you can choose whether to feed it, question it, test it, or revise it. So what helps? First, name the reaction specifically, not just, I don't like them. Ask what the exact feeling is. Do they make you feel intimidated, drained, unseen, pressured, inferior, suspicious, bored? The more precise the language, the more insight you gain. Second, separate behavior from meaning. What did they actually do, and what did you assume it meant? This weakens distortion and strengthens Nyokium. Third, check your state. Are you tired, anxious, socially overloaded, lonely, or already irritated? Emotional state changes social interpretation more than most people realize. Fourth, look for familiarity. Do they remind you of someone, a parent, sibling, teacher, ex-partner, bully, competitor, or friend who betrayed you? This question alone can reveal surprising things. Fifth, notice whether your reaction contains comparison. Are they triggering a wound in your self-esteem? Are they embodying a trait you want, fear, or reject in yourself? And finally, allow time. Human beings are more complex than first contact allows. Some people unfold slowly, Some social signals are culturally different. Some behavior is context specific. One moment is not always a personality. This does not mean ignoring your instincts. It means becoming more intelligent about them. And perhaps that is the real lesson here. The psychology behind instant dislike is not simply that some people are secretly bad and your brain heroically detects it, nor is it that all judgment is unfair and every uncomfortable feeling should be dismissed. The truth is more nuanced and more human than either extreme. Your mind is trying to protect you. Your past is still participating in your present. Your emotions shape what you notice. Your insecurities influence what you condemn. Your social conditioning colors what feels normal, and your nervous system would often rather be fast than correct. That is not a defect, it is a design. But once you heroes raw that design, you gain a kind of freedom. You stop worshiping every first impression as destiny. You become less controlled by invisible habits of perception. You learn to ask better questions, not just, do I like this person, but also, what is happening in me as I decide? That question is powerful because sometimes instant dislike is a warning, sometimes it is a wound, sometimes it is a mirror, sometimes it is anxiety, sometimes it is memory, sometimes it is wisdom, sometimes it is fear pretending to be wisdom. And part of becoming emotionally intelligent is learning the difference. Most people never do that work. They move through life treating every reaction as truth. They call it instinct, personality, standards, realism. But psychology suggests something more humbling. Your inner world is constantly editing reality, not maliciously, not consciously, but continuously. So the next time someone bothers you immediately, before you rush to explain them, pause long enough to explore yourself. What did you notice? What did you assume? What did you feel? What old experience might have spoken first? What part of your Bantan felt threatened? What part felt exposed? And what would happen if just for a moment you treated your reaction not as a final answer, but as the beginning of a deeper explanation? Because that is often where the real insight lives, not in the person you instantly disliked, but in the hidden psychology of the one doing the disliking. And once you see that clearly, people do not just become easier to understand, you do too.